Okay, good morning everyone. I just want to start by thanking Alan and your team for inviting me here to speak today, and thank you for that introduction as well. I was laughing if I had to hold that microphone. I hadn't planned that, and I was like, well, I feel like I'm doing karaoke, maybe. So luckily you don't have to listen to me singing. So just a bit on myself, so an introduction. So my name is Sarah Ryan. I studied civil engineering in DIT back in Bolton Street, and I'm now back in now what's TU Dublin. Back studying in Bolton Street for my Masters in Applied Building Information Modelling Management. I am currently a digital project delivery lead in Walls Construction, and I'm here to talk today about hopefully hitting on the importance of good information management, and that's coming from my point of view, so for working with a main contractor. So if we think of the importance of good information management, I guess it poses the question, what is good information management, and what do we visualise with that? And then again, if we do have an image and a vision of what good information management is, how do we achieve it? And I think that kind of brings together of what does successful information management look like? Forgot to put the word "like" on it, but what does that look like? What do we envision that successful information management? And I'm sure we're all familiar with our desks sometimes looking like this image here, having those sheets, and maybe there is information management involved there, but you're looking at it from the perspective of a broader audience, and if someone else was to walk into that office, how are they going to find it? And I'm sure we've all experienced rumbling through sheets and pages and all information received to then finally find, oh, this is the drawing I was looking for, oh, this is the latest revision, I think, let me go back and check, maybe let me find the register now and back into the rubble of the paper. So just before I start, just a little bit on Walls. So I work for Walls Construction, which is a main contractor. They are a Tier 1 main contractor. And kind of a bit on our digital journey. So our digital transformation journey came from a demand in the requirements, us future thinking, and us to gain more control of managing that information. I started Walls in 2019, and if I think back to there, information management was a thing, but there wasn't so much a demand for BIM processes to be implemented on projects. If there was a case, it was externally sourced, and it wasn't really integrated within the projects. So my journey started there with basically trying to develop a digital project delivery department. Just to touch a little bit on our projects that we currently have going. This year is near enough to us, Boland's Quay. This is a project that's using a site as their common data environment. They're utilising that in such a way to manage all the information processes. They've massive models. It's a 2-tower fit out over a double basement and then 2 link bridges. So there's a little bit of 4D involved in that, so lots of information going on. We then have this XO building, which is down near the 3 Arena. We're fitting out a few stories. So the comparison of this project here only being 6 stories in comparison to this massive building fit out, we're still seeing the advantages of using information management and using all the tools that we have and using models for BIM coordination. We then have the DCU Future Campus, which is, unlike the fit out, it's the whole shell and core and including the fit out. We're using like that, our CDE being DFM systems in this case, and our 3D model is being utilised. This project is unique in the way that it's the client at the end of it, the information that they want to be able to use that. They want that building digital ready. They want to be able to use a digital twin. And then this project's finished. This is the ESB headquarters, the Fitzwilliam. And to me, this project is kind of the starting point to, say, Walls' digital transformation in a way. So this started back in 2019. And if I even look at the likes of the naming convention on it, we were looking at past 1192. So there's been so much progress and moving from this project here that started. So ESB started, and like that, Walls decided that we were going to identify individuals within the company to do that information management role. This was kind of the starting point of that. We did seek external consultation, but we were doing it. We were managing it in-house. This became a massive learning curve. If I asked the site team today, they'll be like, oh, I remember the introduction of naming conventions, and everyone was like, what's that? What's the purpose of it? Or even introducing the CDE and getting training on the common data environment. It was that kind of thing like, oh, do we need to do this? We used ShareFile before, we used SharePoint this time, and it was all that chaos. And it took a bit of selling and a bit of a buy-in to get it, but from there we realised the amount of learning and the amount of procedures that we learned from it. It was ideal. We should carry this forward, and that was where we then started to seek what would be the best approach, and we started to seek then accreditation in ISO 19650. So that brings me on to then discuss kind of the project life cycle around ISO 19650 information management. So for us, when we were going for this, it was more that we needed to learn what happened before, what happens during, and what happens after. And this whole project life cycle displays that. So we think for the assessment and need, we think back to the client coming up with their idea. What do I want? So they'll line that out in their EIOR, their AIOR, their OIOR, PIOR, all the IORs, the information requirements. And they basically then put that out to tender. So this is like, this is the information we want. How are you going to deliver it? Then there's a response there. So that's us coming back, us as the main contractor, responding to that tender, saying, well, this is how we're going to manage that information. This is how we're going to fulfil that project, and this is how we're going to meet the requirements that you've outlined in the assessment and need stage. And then we have the appointment. So when the appointment happens, this would be, say, Walls being awarded that project, you're going to have to start the plan, and the appointment is all about that planning stage. You're saying you have your BIM execution plan, your TIDPs, your MIDP, anything to do with planning that you're getting ahead. In Walls, we also use a CDE execution plan, which is an adaptation. It's an appendix to, say, the BIM execution plan, but on a project where we mightn't have a BIM execution plan, we would use our CDE execution plan. And that's setting the groundworks. That's telling the project team, everyone involved, that this is the plan going forward, and this is how we're going to manage the information. If you're new to the project, or you've gotten a bit lost in the whole process, refer back to the plan. So that's a crucial stage that's outlining that. Now we do look back to what was used in the stages before, so we use that as guidelines, but this is our time to kind of catch up with that and figure it out. So then we move into your mobilisation. So this is then appointing that person. So appointing your information manager, or your project information manager, your design manager as well, and then setting up your CDE, getting these items mobile. And from that, then the production of information. So for me, this area here, for the main contractor's point of view, this is within the project. This is the weekly or bi-weekly clash detection meetings we're going to. This is the information being shared through the CDE. This is all the information being produced, being confirmed, being corrected, and that's that area there, which leads then on to the information model delivery. So we've spent all this time in the production of information, making sure that the information is correct, and making sure that we have the right information, and then we're inputting it into that model, into that 3D area that we then can deliver it, and of course our project closeout. So when we think of our project closeout, we think nearly back to the assessment and need. Are we meeting that EIOR? Did we meet the AIOR? Do we have our asset information model that reaches the requirements of the asset information requirement, your AIOR? So this is what we see as the main contractor. So that kind of brings me on then to the 3 key ingredients in information management, and I think this right here just sums up Walls kind of developing and Walls identifying. And the first ingredient. Oh, did I press it? Oh, reveal. The first of the 3 ingredients would be the people. So I mentioned that when I started back in Walls, there would have been information management there, but there wouldn't have been a key person identified to manage that information throughout the project. And now that introduced the role of the project information manager, which I fulfil myself on some projects, and we have other key members that do that as well. But if we were to refer to a project that doesn't have a project information manager, we look to the design manager as well, and the design manager is there. They don't realise that they're growing into becoming that project information manager with all those skills behind them, with using the common data environment. They are becoming that part of the cake, say, of the 3 ingredients. I thought I revealed the last one again. So then with the process, the process then refers back to our ISO 19650. So when we decided that we were going to go for certification in ISO 19650, we realised that we needed to create procedures, we needed plans in place, we needed templates there, we needed substance, we needed a baseline to set up our projects. So that was where the process came from, and it all stemmed from ISO 19650. And then the final ingredient to the pie would be the tools. So that's looking at your tools, your technology, your CDE, or what other tools you're going to implement, whether you're going to bring in 3D models in Revit or Navisworks, and that then creates your whole pie. And of course you're looking at that and you're like, we have that, and we should be able to make this information management work. But of course we're always met with obstacles. And for me, being, say, new to walls and dealing with people that have been there years before me, and say information management being this like new thing, even though it's always been there, it's just more of putting a structure to it, I would have been met with a lot of, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And I saw this image recently and I just thought it was perfect to describe basically trying to implement new things in digital construction. And basically it's that whole mindset behind that, oh, I don't have time to do that, but it's like, if you did set aside a small amount of time now, you'd be saving a lot of time later, and you'd be rolling rather than I guess moving along harshly. And then it's about getting that right tool as well. So I mentioned there that previously they might have said, oh, we were using SharePoint, or we're using ShareFile, or Google Drive, or any of the OneDrive, and all the different ones. But it is about getting that right tool for the job. And this is another image, which I do love this. I just think it outlines it, that yes, this tool should pump up a tyre, but it's just not the right tool for the job that's at hand. So if we're thinking of our projects and we're thinking of the mass scale of information that we're dealing with, say introducing 3D models and the amount of information that's there, using such a small pump to pump the tyre isn't necessarily going to work. It might eventually work. I don't know to put it down, but it's just going to take that bit longer, and then you're going to lose faith and lose hope in that. So I just back to the ingredients, and I took this from the Build Digital project. And what I love about this diagram is everything I'm speaking of and everything I deal with daily, this kind of links it all together and puts it into a nice diagram of an image. So we look at, and you can see along the bottom, the 3 ingredients: the people, the process, and the technology. So we look at the people, and I know Alan mentioned earlier about having that appointed party and your lead appointed party, having them there, and that's your information roles. They're the people that we have to identify to manage these roles and setting those standards, and that becomes your delivery team, overlapping with your information requirements. So it always has to tie back, what did the client want, what did the customer want in the beginning, the OIR, the AIR, and the PIR, and that all then comes together with your EIR, so your exchange information, what are you going to be exchanging in the end. And then you're, again, with tying into the process, but at nearly a developing stage of it, you have your LOIN, so your level of information need relating to your responsibility matrix, and then your BIM execution plan. So, and then tying into your information delivery plans as well. And then it's where all that is stored, all this information that we're dealing with, all these plans we're dealing with. Of course, they have to be put somewhere, and ideally, we'd put them into a common data environment, into our CDE. I know for common data environments, it's always good to have that single source of truth available. I know in previous projects working with the likes of the other information sharing, so ShareFile, SharePoint, and that, sometimes it's a difficult process. There's not that those procedures behind it. But introducing a common data environment and introducing a CD execution plan, which us and Walls use, we have that outlined, we have that baseline, we have the control over it as well. We identify your information manager on it with your gatekeeper as well, someone there to manage that information and make sure it's there. Whereas on the other platforms, you're uploading without controls, you're uploading where you want, and also you're uploading to different platforms. You can upload to any of them and send a link to it, and it's not as organised as it could be. And then with your information model, so just back to technology and tools. So I mentioned with the CDE being a tool as well, and that then linking into where you share those models. And especially now with the massive amount of information that is involved in 3D models and even 4D models, trying to save that somewhere, trying to download that somewhere, it works. It's ideal to have that on a common data environment, on an area that everyone who needs access has access to it. So that basically highlights the three ingredients at the bottom, tying in everything that you probably hear on a daily basis, and how important and how relevant it would be to keep that to a standard. If we're thinking back to the beginning when the design is happening and who sets those standards to begin with, and then bringing that onto the contractor, those teams might change, things might change, but the standard should stay the same. The standard should be that anyone can come in and understand it, rather than that chaos of, oh, I wonder what that was named, or I wonder what was there, or trying to figure it out. And yeah, sometimes it can work. Great, you can figure it out. It can be on that smaller scale, or it can be just transparent in that way. But always good to have that back up there and that standard to follow. So this is kind of like what really enforces good information management. So this basically got me thinking, like, what is it? Why, with all these ingredients, what is the main thing that's around it? And it's creating that plan. And that's why we have BIM execution plans. That's why we now have CitA execution plans, because we saw the need for a BIM execution plan for using BIM models. So why not use that on other projects as well, that are utilising BIM tools but aren't utilising BIM models? And I saw this and it made sense. So the plan is to have a plan before you need a plan. And what happened recently with that, and with plans being in place, we basically were awarded a fit-out project. It hasn't started yet, so I won't go into too much detail. But we were basically awarded a fit-out project, and we received all the information that we needed: our AIOR, our EIOR, our BIM execution plan, our pre-appointed BIM execution plan, and we were like, this is good, this is looking great. We could see there was comments on it. We could see that everyone from that design stage had commented on it, had interacted with it, and we were like, this is great, this is going to work perfectly. So obviously we were starting our response to that, doing our construction stage BIM execution plan, and straight away I was like, oh, I need to name this. So I went back to look and see, okay, what naming convention did they use? Because us as a main contractor, we will look at the design stage and say, we're going to use a similar naming convention to them, most likely the same, because like that we want to keep it transparent for the consumer at the end, or for the customer. We don't want to change too much because we want this information process to work. And when we looked back, you could see that there was interaction on the BIM execution plan of comments, and basically it said the naming convention will follow ISO 19650, the UK annex, or the Irish annex. So straight away it was, okay, we have, I don't know which ones they've used. I can obviously ask that question. But I was like, before that, I'll go and have a look at what the task team members used and what we were supplied with. So we received kind of 5 different disciplines of information, and 4 out of the 5 used the UK annex, and 1 person used the Irish annex. And straight away I was like, that's not even going to work for our CDE. Our CDE is not going to recognise it. What do we do here? And of course that person that used the Irish annex, they might have had that forward thinking. They might have heard, maybe in a meeting it was said, oh, we'll go with the Irish annex, but the others then decided to fall back and use the UK annex. But that basically then fell for us. So we were like, what's our plan going forward? What are we going to use? Should we take that next step? Should we take that next step and move forward? But does that mean we have to look at the people that have already named it and get them to change it? So unfortunately it fell on the 1 task team members that used the Irish annex, and we reverted back to the UK annex. I don't want to say back, it still exists, but we decided to move forward with that, and that's us planning then what we're going to do at construction stage. That's us saying, okay, we need to tell our subcontractors to use the UK annex for uploading to the CD and enforcing that. And of course it's always good to have a nice cheesy saying within your presentation, and this reminds me of the Leaving Cert and teachers constantly saying to me, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And I just think it's so true, and it's there, and it really applies to good information management. So then I thought it wasn't changing, just to kind of summarise it. So I've talked a bit on the importance of good information management from my perspective, and you can see that the 3 ingredients, your people, your process, and your tools or technology. And it's so important that at my stage, at construction stage, so the stage that I live in and work in, that I enforce those and I keep the regulations there and I keep the standards there. But it's important that phases through the whole project. That's there from the start. We think back to the idea. It's baselined there and it's carried out throughout, because like that, otherwise we're all like this. Imagine that information, it's in our head, we are managing it, but it's just chaos, it's just not managed. So by introducing those tools, by having the standards in place, we want then everyone to be working collaboratively, happy, clean desk, everything nice. And yeah, that's kind of the main thing. Like, we want things to run smoothly, and implementing information management is the way for that. So that brings me nicely to the end. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.